Meg, thanks very much for your time.
That's fine.
You talked a lot in there about the desire for publishers to be able to engage with communities and actually how to create communities. What would you say, though, is the first step that a publisher needs to be thinking about when they want to reach out to a broader audience rather than just publishing pages and throwing them at them?
I think publishers really need to think about commissioning in a different way. So it's not just about different delivery mediums, and it's not. It could be print, or it could be web, or it could be via a podcast or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually thinking about commissioning content slightly differently. So one of the things that we have to think about is that eventually all content is going to end up on the web.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all content that a publisher puts together. So you have to think about the web from the first thought about the content proposition, not just we'll write it in a certain way and then we'll bung it somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I think publishers need to think about the full commissioning story and publishing story, not just the end result.
And you talked about communities as forming from casual users to, I think it was connected
To
committed, and then to catalysts,
yes.
and catalysts being the final stage of really the people
Or
who
the
are out
first
evangelising.
stage, or the first stage.
Well, I guess if you complete the circle.
That's right.
How do you actually go about identifying, engaging with or recruiting these people? I mean, what's been the story for The Guardian?
Well, the first thing with casual users is to think about the long tail and think
Mm-hmm.
about that most people are coming to your website not via the front door. They're crawling in through the bathroom window and up the
Right.
drain pipes. I mean, they're coming in via search engines,
Mm-hmm.
via referrals, via blogs and Twitters and all sorts of things. So figuring out where people are talking about you and how they're getting to you in the first place is a great way to start thinking about engaging your casual users, because once you understand what they're there for,
Mm-hmm.
you can start to kind of try and move them in. So a good example of that is to ask yourself, just from a user experience perspective, on every single page that is on the site, does a user know why they're there and where they go next? And it sounds like a very simple test, but actually it's remarkably difficult. If you've just searched on in from you've been searching for Tony Blair and you've arrived on some sub-page of the
Mm-hmm.
Guardian site, do you know how that fits into history? Do you know where it was in the timeline? Do you know how what else you could read about those topics and subjects? And it's about making a user experience that actually helps people to move on. So moving from casual to connected users tends to be about turning one click into two.
Right. How do you then turn 2 into 3 or 3 into 4 and so forth?
Well, if I had the magic formula, believe me, I'd be bottling it and selling it on the streets.
Right,
But
you wouldn't be telling me.
I wouldn't be telling you.
Okay.
It's a secret sauce. No.
Tell my audience, I want.
I think the thing about turning those 2 clicks or connected users into committed users is really about understanding what drives, what's the passions, what are the things that are actually going to keep people coming back, not just because it's convenient for you,
Mm-hmm.
but because it's beneficial for them. So it's trying to understand your users more and trying to understand what really kind of makes them tick. Caroline Little made a great point this morning when she was talking about, if you can get people to lean forward, if you can get people to get engaged in your conversation, in your content, then they're more likely to want to know what happens next.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great thing for us. It's understanding how you can make people feel like they're part of the story, not just recipients, passive recipients of it. So it's not just about turning 2 clicks into 3.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's about turning those 2 clicks into something that people really care about and are interested in what happens next.
And the final or foremost group, depending on how to look at it, the catalysts.
Yeah.
Obviously very important because, as you said, these are the people who are out engaging with the brand, telling other people about stories, sending links, digging stories and so forth.
That's right.
They're an incredibly difficult group to work with, though, because a positively committed catalyst can turn into a negative catalyst very, very quickly if you don't treat them well.
Yeah. Well, they feel like they've got real ownership over the brand. And, in some ways they do, because they really start to inform, how the brand is perceived elsewhere. The funny thing about catalysts is you can't pay them, and in fact if you did pay them you'd get a very different result. You can't recruit them, you can't ask people to sign up to their, to your amazing catalyst program. You can't, like any brand advocates, you have to find what people are already doing and then figure out how you can support their organic activity rather than going out and saying, hey, we'll give you a $5 if you can blog about us or something.
But are they in any way like sort of the regular caller on Talkback Radio? Or?
Oh, who can go feral at any moment?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think Catalyst, what we have to think about from as a media organisation is that we're not just looking for people who will blog about us in a really positive way. We're talking about extending the conversation and trying to get the conversation out there and on the web. So it's not just people who say The Guardian are really great that are Catalyst. It's also people who say, here's a link, you've got to check this out. I think these guys are morons, or I think they're completely wrong. Because it's about getting the conversation started. So it's making the difference. It's trying to understand the difference between love marks, which is sort of what they can, brands strive towards being love marks, you know,
right, yes.
things that people absolutely adore. Apple's a great example of that. And being social objects, things that people are talking about all the time. We want to be a social object, not necessarily an object of total adoration.
And you know you made it when you lampooned on The Simpsons then.
Absolutely.
Right. You gave one example in the seminar about a project you did with Flickr, which was to encourage people to take a photo of themselves, incorporating a slogan as a message to Barack Obama.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how you actually came up with that concept, and whether the way that you come up with concepts online is different to perhaps the way you might do for the newspaper itself?
Well, so we came up with that concept. It sounds, you know, I'd love to be able to say we had a strategy meeting and a brainstorm, we got a whiteboard out and we figured it out. But actually what happened is I was talking with Emily Bell, who's the Director of Digital Content for Guardian Co UK, and we just said, you know, all these people are talking about it. There must be a way for us to actually start capturing it. And I took a photo of her holding a sign and stuck it on my Flickr stream. So the first photos in that group are actually things that I've taken on my iPhone, pictures of people going, please be careful, or because there was a lot of people who were, what we wanted to tap into was not how can we make this into a Guardian project, but people were saying to each other, I really hope he stays safe, or I really hope he doesn't let us down, or, you know, things like that. So it was a way to kind of try and tap into the conversations, the messages that people were thinking about anyway, and thinking about in relation to him. So all we did in that sense was create a platform for it, create some very clean constraints and a low barrier to entry. You know, one of the problems that we actually had when we decided to make it into a book, which we, by the way, decided after about 4 days because we just saw how amazing the response was that a lot of the images that people had sent in were far too low quality to reproduce in print.
Right.
So one of the constraints that we set up actually ended up being a real problem for us because people had got these really crappy cam phone pics, and you know they just don't look any good in a book. So that was kind of an issue. But in terms of kind of coming up with new concepts, I think what it taught us was, you know, as a media organisation, we have to think about stuff that really kind of hits the zeitgeist. You know, that is actually very much of its time, can only be done, you know, at a very particular moment, and can only be done potentially by you. So it's right time, right topic, right partner. And in that case, you know, it was us actually presenting that because people know The Guardian or are okay with the idea of The Guardian being about presenting news in a human way, you know.
Yeah.
So we were quite a natural people to do that, and it's been copied, by the way, since by several other big media organisations, but not with the same success, I should say. Very good. But actually, it's thinking about right time, right place, right medium, and also right technology. And for us, the right technology, honestly, if we had built it ourselves, we would have still been building it by the time he was sworn in, and that would have been far too late.
But it seems very much a case of let's just try it and see what happens, use the tools that are there.
You have to be brave as a media organisation. You have to be able to say, let's make multiple small bets and see what pays off, and actually learn from that and then use it next. So great example with the Message for Obama pool was, you know, as I say, it didn't sell an enormous number of copies. It didn't, you know, do a huge amount in terms of financial reward, but it got people thinking about us in a new way, and it got people thinking about our approach to community in a very fair way. So people thought, you know, The Guardian are okay with this. So through January, we've been able to create several other projects that involve Flickr or user contributions and photos and stuff. And people have been happy to contribute because they just think, you know, The Guardian, these guys get it. And that's, you know, when somebody says to us that we get it, that's got to be a good thing. It's got to be a good sign, you know.
Great. On that note, we'll leave you be. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.